Well, hello everybody, and welcome to the San Diego Filmmakers November meeting. We do now have producer-director, Mr. Chris Cashman, who's here tonight to tell us about his latest film, Club Frontera, and what it takes to make a film across the border. So, without further ado,
Thanks guys for having me, and this is actually really special to be here because I look at Bill and I look at Martin and everybody that I met through this group when I moved from Los Angeles down here probably about 6 years ago. It's because of this group I've been able to do a lot of projects, so you know, I hope we can continue working all together. So I'm going to start out showing you the trailer that we made for the film, and then we'll take it from there.
De todo México.
About almost 2 years ago, I got a call at midnight from my good friend Eddie here, and I thought it was just a drunk dial or what have you, saying, Chris, we want you to make a movie about the Xolos. And I'm just like, I listened to it, you're drunk, and I didn't think about it, didn't call him back. A week later, he calls me, he goes, what's going on? Why didn't you call me back? Don't you want to work on a film about the Xolos? I'm like, gangsters? Like, what are you talking about? And he's like, no. He's like, Murray, which is a very good friend of Eddie's, actually an investor for another project I was working on, had seen one of my films and suggested to Eddie that he wanted me to make a movie about the Tijuana Xolos, the soccer team down there. And quite honestly, I knew nothing about it. And I remember talking to my wife, and she said, well, you know, it's the soccer team down there. I'm sure you've seen the sticker, and I'm sure all of us have at one point. But we lived in Chula Vista for about 4 years, and I always thought the sticker of the Xolos was a nightclub because it says Club Tijuana, and I'm like, oh, that's like frogs or something. And so, you know, I'm like, well, you know, nightclub, whatever. So, but so that's how very little I knew about this team. And I actually think it was a blessing in disguise because I went into it without knowing anything. And I educated myself, and I shot the film as if someone from Ohio, or even a lot of people in this room, they were completely unaware of this championship team. So I did my research. At that point, they had just won the championship. And it was the fastest ever for a team, a first division team, to win in 18 months. Of getting into the first division, 18 months later, they won it all. And it's crazy because it's, you know, from my house in University City to the stadium is 30 minutes, and I was completely unaware of all this like greatness that was going on down there. And so basically, yeah, from there, we just started, I don't know, trying to figure out a way to get in and make a film about the team.
So, speaking about your research, tell us about your research, what you did to...
Well, the only thing I knew, as I said, my wife's family is from Tijuana and Mexicali, and I knew that someone had to know something about this team. And they're like, well, so-and-so's nephew works for the team. And all I had was his name, and it was Tito Fimbres. And I tried getting a hold of their media department with no luck. And so we just said, we found out, hey, there's a game on Saturday, let's just go. And we went down, and we got there early, and we're the only gringos around. And we just walked right through the gate, acting like we're supposed to be there. And I just told the guys, I was like, look, if we get busted, just say we're looking for Tito Fimbres. I don't know who he is, but hopefully he's a good guy. And you know, so we did. We got down to the field, actually, and this is before the game. And one security guard came up to us and said, you know, what are you guys doing? And we're like, oh, we're here with Tito Fimbres. And he's like, oh, Tito, yeah, he's awesome. Oh, yeah, Tito. And I'm like, all right, great. So to this day, a year and a half later, I've yet to meet Tito Fimbres. And I almost want to make a movie about Tito Fimbres. But yeah, I mean, I guess if you just act like you're supposed to be there and, you know, you're respectful and what have you, it just, you know, so we took it in. And then it took actually going up to LA. I went with Tommy. We went to the Galaxy game. And I actually got press passes through the Galaxy. I called Galaxy and they said, oh, who are you guys with? And we're like, well, Club Frontera. And they're like, yeah, the Xolos don't know anything about you, but they granted you access. And I'm like, wow, that's so bizarre. Like, okay. So we got full access passes on the field, and I'm there, and I bump into a guy. They're doing warm-ups, and I'm like, the guy came up, who are you with? And I'm like, oh, yeah. He's like, oh, yeah, I got your email. That was like a month ago. And he's like, oh, great. And he gave me a business card. So it took me going to Los Angeles to talk to the guy that actually ended up giving me, getting me access to everything. But yeah, it was pretty fun. And I asked him about Tito, and he's like, oh, he was just here 5 minutes ago. I'm like, oh, great. So I do want to meet this Tito Fimbres. So.
Okay, so what was it like the first time you went into Tijuana?
I mean, I've always loved and respected Mexico. Like growing up in San Diego, I've going surfing down there, and I just never, I obviously probably I guess when the violence was happening, or the height of the violence, I was living in Los Angeles, so it wasn't really, I just didn't go down there. But I think I was a little sketched out, a little bit. I mean, but I knew I was going to go down, and every time since the first time, I always brought people that are familiar with the area and knew, or well behaved, and I knew that they would be a good representation of the production, and and spoke Spanish. I don't speak Spanish, so I always had to have a translator with me. So yeah, I think it mean a little bit. I mean, because I hadn't been there in 7 years, so I was a little worried. But when we got down there, I was like, wow, this is awesome, and I never really thought about it ever, the whole time I was down there. So.
Okay, so how did you win their trust and confidence? You were the gringo, the American coming down to interview them. You weren't part of them.
Right. I think it took a while, and Eddie and I always talk about this. I think this took a lot longer because we didn't have necessarily an in. I think the Mexican culture, they work a lot different than we are. Like when you do business here, everything's always like, oh, let's do business. There, they actually want to get to know you as a person, and especially something like this where it is family run. I think they did want to know kind of what my intentions were. Why are these gringos down here filming down here? And I think after we started showing them, and interviewing the players and what we were doing, kept on going down. I think they saw that this was all for the good, and we really wanted to show Tijuana what I love about Tijuana. Why almost 2 million people live in Tijuana. It's a huge city, and I think people overlook that. They constantly think, oh, it's negative, it's violent, this, that. Well, it's like any big city in the world. I mean, I'm sure there are parts of Tijuana that you probably don't want to be in, but if you're with the right people, and you should be fine, and don't do anything you wouldn't do in your own town.
So talking about safety, that's a critical issue. You're going down there with some expensive equipment, and did you have concern with that being misappropriated somehow, or?
No, like I said, I mean, I think we always went as a group, so it was never, everyone kind of, watched each other or what have you. And even the times we went into maybe a little bit more sketchy parts of the city, we were with good people. And we actually at once were in a part of Tijuana that is it's considered one of the more dangerous parts. And we were filming outside a car, and we actually filmed a drug deal. And we got to the house, and these guys came racing up in a car. And they said, well, who are these guys? They just filmed something that was going on down there. And of course, they thought we were, police or narco. I don't something. I don't know what they thought we were doing down there. But because of the people we were associated with, they were good people, neighborhood people. They just said, oh, okay, and they knew what we were filming about, filming the Xolos. So that was one time that I was a little more concerned. But yeah, you just got to be smart, And as far as the equipment, no, I mean, I think, it was funny because I brought someone that was Latino, like a Chicano from San Diego down there, and he was so sketched out. He was always like, oh, those guys are following me. Those guys are watching me change the lenses. Oh, we gotta go. And I'm like, ooh, what people? And there's a group of 6 or 7 of us, and I'm just like, I don't know. But yeah, you just got to be smart, you know.
Okay, so you are primarily a narrative feature film kind of filmmaker.
Yeah.
What was it like making a transition to doing a documentary? It's a totally different genre.
Yeah, because I'm not a documentary filmmaker. You know, I was hired based on how I can tell stories. And basically, I think the toughest thing for me is the logistics of a documentary. Because you're dealing with people that they live day-to-day lives, they're not actors. Where I was used to saying, well, I'm paying this actor, this is their call time, they'll be there. We're basically waiting around for people to show up, and you got to be patient too. And that or you get the call and say, hey, I'm ready for that interview. You want to come down tonight? And I'm like, well, it's not that easy. Because we also were very low profile. We specifically went down with DSLR cameras. So a lot of times, you know, you'd be in a crowd and everyone would be like, photo, photo. And I'm like, okay. And so we'd set up and we're like, you know, rolling, go Xolos, Xolos. And so we have all this footage of people just freezing, like Xolos. And I'm like, okay. So I don't know, I may put something at the end of all these people, you know. So that actually worked in our advantage because we were able to, like, you know, get a lot of footage that maybe people thought we were just taking pictures. And, you know, maybe they would have acted differently. But the culture down there, people love cameras. They're very excited, like, about, you know, they're very curious. A lot of times they say, Fox Sports, ESPN? And I'm like, no, and I try to explain independent film, and they're like, I don't know what that means. And then I'm like, and then we just got used to saying, yeah, Fox Sports. And I'm like, yeah, Fox Sports. Like, I'm like, okay.
So what was the story you wanted to tell? What did your concept, your preconception of what you wanted to tell, did it end up being something different once you became involved?
Most definitely, considering I knew nothing about this world. We went in with the intentions of making a film about just the success, because of the rapid success. But when we found out, every person we started interviewing, they had stories, and that guy had a story, and how the team had affected them, like they got them a job, or you got to understand that Tijuana has never had a professional team like to this level ever, like in, you know, all the years. And being the third largest city in Mexico, that's pretty wild. And a lot of the people that live there, they root for their father's team or their grandfather's team. So Tijuana never had like an identity, and never felt like people collectively, like, I was born in Tijuana, you know, like, I never had a team. I rooted for the Chivas because my dad was, but he wasn't from, you know, Guadalajara. But it's so nice to see. So that's where we kind of started thinking of the story of how this gave people some identity, something collectively to root for, but as well as something positive. Everyone can get behind it, because quite honestly, I mean, you talk to people outside, you know, right away people are talking about the safety, or it's always negative about Tijuana. It's never like, wow, Tijuana, you know, everyone always says, oh, they think about, you know, obviously, you know, the prostitution, the drugs, the human trafficking. You know, of course, that stuff exists, but it's such a small percentage of this metropolis down there. And that's what I wanted to show. So we basically started thinking of the people we were meeting. At first, you know, going through the process, you're interviewing someone, you're like, wow, this guy's going to be the guy. Like, and then you meet somebody else, and then that guy trumps that guy. And so yeah, I mean, it kind of transformed itself. We have three main characters that we follow that are of different economic stature, as well as different representations of Tijuana, because it is a melting pot. It's a huge, you know, people from all over Central and South America that have come to Tijuana, and we really wanted to show a very good representation of, you know, of people from Tijuana, and we made it for them. I mean, it's like, obviously, I think people from San Diego, we're part of it, and we're definitely part of that story, but I just wanted to show a positive story of the city and how the team is helping them.
So would it be fair to say that the documentary is really about the fans more so than the team?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think I'm a sports person, but I'm not a fanatic, and I didn't want it to be a film about numbers or stats or that stuff doesn't. I'll let someone else make that movie. And I'm sure, because they have broken records, they're players that have done all these great things. But when I talk to a player, I talk to them how they've been affected playing for Tijuana, living in Tijuana. I don't really care about how many goals they score. And it's interesting because they have a lot of players. The team itself is a great representation of the city as well. They have players, they have 5 starters from Argentina. And I think they only have like maybe 2 or 3 guys that are from Mexico that actually are on the starting team. But there are Americans as well that play there. So that was a whole other angle of it. Americans that they can live here in the States and they go to work every day and they cross the border. So there is a young player named Alejandro Guido who we followed and went into his house. He got signed on his 18th birthday. He could have played for UCLA, I think UCLA or Stanford, an MLS team or the Xolos, and he chose to play in Mexico. And yeah, it's pretty cool.
Well, thank you, Chris. I appreciate
thanks,
it.
guys.